Hey everyone, it's Richard Metal Fan here, bringing you guys a brand new 2023 album review. And this is a review that I did not expect to enjoy. Um, this is something that I was kind of surprised by. And as you can see below the title, today we're going to be looking into the new album from the band In Flames entitled Forgone, which is out now through Nuclear Blast Records. Now, In Flames, I probably don't need to go much into detail. I'm pretty sure everybody's aware of them. Been around since the early to mid 90s from Gothenburg, Sweden. And they're part of the band that started the whole Gothenburg sound of pretty much the whole Swedish death metal scene with bands like Dark Tranquillity, At the Gates, The Haunted, Soilwork, bands like that. And for me, In Flames, I really enjoy mostly like their older stuff, which is the more of the melodic death metal sound, which is basically like Just Erase, Horkle, which in my opinion is probably them at their peak. And I know it was pretty much from their debut album Lunar Strain, which at the time they had Mikael Stanne from Dark Tranquillity as the frontman, but after that they got Anders Frieden, who actually used to be in Dark Tranquillity, and then they switched bands. And they've pretty much, I consider them melodic death metal, but it wasn't until like 2002 with their album Reroute to Remain that they started to experiment more, especially with the clean vocals, and go more alternative metal. And they really diverged into mostly until the 2010s with Sounds of a Playground Fading. But I feel like after that, they kind of had hit a lull where they kind of went, I don't know, it just feels like they went more of radio rock stuff. But I feel like with then their previous album, that came out in 2019, I The Mask, I thought it was slowly beginning of the route, so I thought it was a pretty good album, but over time I think I would consider it decent. So pretty much up to par with like Sounds of a Playground Fading. Now, when I heard the first single from this album, I was like, which is State of Slow Decay, and I was like, holy shit, like the band kind of went back to the roots. It's pretty much, I thought it was the best thing they've done since Clayman, in my opinion. And I'm pretty sure there's the whole, I guess people would consider it rivalry between them and of course the Halo Effect, which has 4 members of In Flames. And I'm just curious if In Flames actually heard Halo Effect, and they'll probably be like, yeah, we got to stop writing pop songs. And then this is pretty much, I feel like, is a return to form, which a lot of people say. And I'm hoping the rest of the song is on my back. And then they released more singles, and I was like, all right, wow. And I pretty much heard like half the album already. And I was like, this is In Flames is definitely back. I actually never thought I would say this. And then I've heard the album, and I was like, this is actually, in my opinion, the best thing that In Flames has done to date, pretty much in over 20 years. And yeah, and I was like really impressed. The production is just amazing. Like everything is where it needs to be. One thing to note is like Anders Frieden's voice. Like I think his growling and harsh vocals really are a par. Kind of reminds me a lot of the 90s era of In Flames, and his clean singing is really powerful and just really has like I don't know how to describe it, an epic vibe with it. The guitar work on this album is pretty tight. Bjorn really comes up with some really great riffs, and this is the first album with their new guitarist, Chris Broderick, who pretty much a lot of people know plays with Active Defiance, and he used to play guitar for Megadeth. And I think he pretty much got not Megadeth, In Flames, I can't even talk today, it's pretty much back to where it was. Like his lead playing is really great. The bass playing on this album is pretty audible. Bryce Paul really stepped up in there, and the drumming from Tanner Wayne, like his drumming is really great. And yeah, and I pretty much rambled on for a little over 4 minutes, so let's dive into this album track by track. Now, starting things off is The Beginning of All Things, which is an appropriate title to start off the album. It begins with sort of like a kind of acoustic tunes, and then I feel like there's like even a little bit of cellos, and I feel like the intro is pretty much to amplify the strong effect of the next song, which is the first single from this album, being State of Slow Decay, and it immediately delivers the signature In Flames riff. And honestly, some of the riffs in here kind of remind me a lot of Blinded by Fear by At the Gates. Just, it sounds really similar, and Anders has a really great heaviness about his approach, and I feel like this is pretty much, like I said, the best thing that I've done in almost 20 years, and I was really kind of surprised when I heard this song. Really great first taste of Forgone, if you ask me. Moving on to Meet Your Maker. Now, Meet Your Maker is a really good song with just full of rage. And this song's lyrically, I feel like it talks about desperation and frustration, especially with after the whole pandemic that we had been in and for the last couple years. And you could definitely feel like the frustration in Anders' voice. Next song on the album is called Bleeding Out. Now, this kind of starts off with electronic Nicky kind of intro and some really great rhythmic patterns, which develops into something kind of predictable. And the clean vocals here are really great, and the guitar solo on here is really insane. Moving on to Forgone Part 1. Now, vocally, this song is heavy throughout and has a really great pace on the guitar, drums, and etc. And everything like tuned really well to the particular Gothenburg sound, and there's like a nice guitar solo at the end of here which goes well, and then we go into Forgone Part 2. Now Anders right here is doing more harsh vocals, and the riffs and kind of remind me of like something between like Man and Come Clarity with a really nice production. Next up is Pure Light of Mine. Now this is pretty much where the album kind of slows down a little bit. It's kind of a very ballady with a catchy melody, and the vocal part, or it kind of reminds me of something like from a pop act like Imagine Dragons or some shit. But if there were not some extreme vocals here, it would be a perfect song for the radio. But I just think we had like a blast beats for a couple songs ago, and they definitely know how to pull back a little bit. Next up is The Great Deceiver. Now Anders leaps in with sort of like his harsh vocals and the rest of the band, and goes into a medley with tuning on like the era many albums ago. And I feel like In Flames showcased the heavier direction on The Great Deceiver, and they ensure that they've definitely matured and developed the direction, and with sort of like behind all the technical mayhem. And this is pretty much the return of the In Flames that old school fans that have been really looking forward to. Moving on to In the Dark. Now In the Dark is an aggressive kind of song with some very haunting sounds heard from the definite, and I admire kind of like the mechanical rhythm of this, and I think the impression of like a soulless machine. I can't even, it's hard to describe it, just like with the drums, which pretty much sets up the whole tone. And I can't really help to notice what the guitars are sound, and just visibly or they are. Next song on the album is called A Dialogue in B flat minor. Now it starts off with a scream, and then it goes into one of my favorite musical moments, which starts off with a slight riff and a beat that grows musical flesh, and due to the balance of like the combination of the cleans and vocals and the screams. And this song has almost kind of like a split personality type, and it's doing really well. Next up is Cynosure. Now the bass line on this guides throughout the whole song, and I think the whole rhythm section as well. And I love how like the calm verses and the chorus makes it kind of like almost emotional in a way. Next up we get to the last song on the album, which is End of Transmission, which is a very good way to end this album. It ends everything all of a sudden, and nothing makes sense and no one is listening, with the very last lines. It sounds bitter at first, but you can remember that you could start listening to this whole album from the beginning, and I just think it just goes perfectly. Whew. Now overall, Forgone by In Flames, definitely return to form. One of my most anticipated albums for 2023. If I had to give this album a score, so far I'm going to give this, actually going to give it a perfect 10 out of 10. I actually really dig this album. So yeah, that's my review of the new In Flames album, guys. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about it, and I'll see you all in the next video. And as always, keep it metal.